This is Brother Ron, and welcome to We All Be News Radio and TV, the news-free Dixie for the 21st century.
I'm sort of a pessimist on this. I don't think integration is the problem or the cause of what we are facing right now. It's about to be resurgent because the country's in need of some scapegoats, if only some vicarious scapegoats, because they failed to move the general population into the 21st century so that they are not obsoleted by industrial technology and computerization. The jailhouse to the schoolhouse and back again is basically a product of the society not having ample employment for most of its citizens. So the penitentiaries are a place to store surplus labor. Some people mistakenly think it's a place to get free labor. It's not. It's a warehouse, like a grain silo, and the labor's like a commodity, like agricultural commodities. It doesn't make any difference. Next thing is, in the next 25 to 30 years, the country is no longer going to be a majority white country, and that will start setting up coalitions, but there are already phenomenon around, including particularly here, since this is the largest majority black city in America. Most people don't know that, but it is. And it is an experiment and a reversion to a plantation situation where there are a whole lot of people that look one way and a very few of the other that try to maintain control by various means. I think the main problem we have right now, outside of race, and that the tension gets generated by, is the country has gone off into a new paradigm of child rearing. Back in 1968, when the Vietnam War was a hot topic, I heard it often on the West Coast and the East Coast when I traveled around doing BSU activities. And what it was is, war is a man thing, so the way to stop war is to change the way boys are raised to men. They should be raised like girls so that they are prone to emote. How do they put it? To emote, to cry, to shout, to let it all hang out instead of trying to be so uptight and under control. They needed to be softer, kinder, gentler, and then we found George Herbert Walker Bush actually started giving out awards to that effect in the late 80s. Then there was the movement where you had white males who were straight, who could not make it in the white world because they said it was unfair competition. In other words, we would call them wimps and nerds now, and they didn't make it, so they had a vested interest. And then the LGBT community was developing, and they got control of the Hollywood industry in the late 60s, and there is a push to emasculate the country. I still see all sorts of things that are put out to stop the violence, but every single one of them I've seen just about is actually part of the causality. I don't know what anybody had for breakfast, lunch, or dinner in the last week, but I guess it would be safe to surmise it had to do with something that once was alive. We hold the interesting position of being the planetary apex predator. We kill anything on the planet we want to eat, stuff, mount, or get rid of, and we do well at killing each other when there's a competition. That's inherent into nature. But over eons, we developed a culture about the way boys were supposed to be raised, so they got deep into duty, honor, obligation, responsibility, accountability, dependability, courage, and bravery, and willingness to sacrifice for the many. A popular phrasing of that was known as women and children in the lifeboat first. Women were a resource, so were children. There were some very tight rules and constraints put down on the way boys were raised so that it would become internalized, these values, so he would be under self-control. In the last 50 years, since 1968, I've seen an ever-increasing trend to make it all right to be emotional. Now, I had that show out there for 15 years, and California Supreme Court said what we were doing was binding arbitration under California and U.S. law, and I was qualified as a California arbitrator. And I saw it over and over and over again. Why in the world did you do this? I was emotional. Why do you think that's an excuse? Well, because I was emotional. That's no excuse. Fight after fight with the Hollywood crew out there. I'm not going to do this. That woman is wrong. But you cut down the ratings. If she had succeeded in what she had tried to do, she'd be in jail for first-degree murder. But she was emotional. There's no excuse. And Hollywood is the media industry now, print and electronic. It switched over into a tabloid mentality. What used to be, if you're old enough, on the last page of the last section, last column, known as the gossip column, is now the priority for the media. They are not interested in reporting the news to you because there's not that much that goes on, but they want ratings because news has become a primary source of entertainment. So they deal with salacious information that will keep you tuned in to see the latest developments. The news media has become a stand-in for those what I call obscenely sleazy soaps that controlled the country for about 80 years, and apparently it's standing in to give the country a dose of low-life conduct. We, thanks to those things and to a few other points, have become inured to some very reprehensible, awful conduct. This shooting down there in Florida, people are upset because they had guy had a Smith & Wesson military and police MP-15, which is a slant off on a stoner design. It's been around for exactly 65 years. It's the longest serving weapon in the U.S. military's history, but it's not a military weapon. Contrary to what the media lets you know about, an assault rifle is prima facie a full-fledged machine gun that can be switched over to select fire. These don't. It's America's #1 hunting rifle, and I'll just say this, I'm leading up to something. In the entire history of the country, the civilian population has always had access to the latest military rifle, whatever it was. This one is probably the most popular weapon in the country. Is it the problem? No, that's not the real problem. The real problem you see if you look at some of the video where you see that school officer in uniform armed, he doesn't go in to stop it. When you see those 4 deputies who arrive and they crouch behind cars until the shooting's over, when the protocol they got taught by says first thing, go in and stop the shooter, confront him. They didn't. That's cowardice. And that's okay these days because you don't teach that to boys. You don't ram it down their throats that they have an obligation to make where they live a better, safer, more secure, prosperous place with ethics and some kind of reason to be there. That's obsolete. I got a standing ovation from 500 soldiers in the Army Corps of Engineers when I spoke to them, when I said your motto that you advertise is wrong. It's not be all you can be, it's be all you should be. There is a difference. Do your thing. Do what you want to do. Sending the country to hell, excuse the language. And we are not doing anything about it. There's no discipline in the schools. The single parent head of household situations are just incompetent for the most part. And what they see on the media emphasizes ineffective parenting. I saw some of the biggest tycoons and shakers and makers in Hollywood at one party that stands out in my mind. It was an outdoor house party, and there were children there, and it sounded like it was something out of a psychologist convention for child psychologists. The wife of one very prominent studio executive who still has a great deal to do with what you see is standing there, and her son Charles is in the tree. Charles, please come down. You're making mother frightened, Charles. Charles, please come down. I don't want to, Mama. Charles, mother is going to cry. You'll just have to, Mama. I'll take a 10-minute time out. Charles, and then the executive comes out. Charles, you listen to your mother. You'll have to do a 30-minute time out. Well, I almost choked when this little fool falls out of the tree and fractures his wrist, okay? So instead of them taking this kid to the emergency room, they go through this elaborate drama of calling 911. There happens to be a major one of those wildfires going on, and they really need to be somewhere else, and the paramedic gets mad at them, and they want to throw their weight around about how important they are because they didn't take him in their car to an emergency room that was nearby. They had to tie up 911. I call it the sissification of the country by the taking away of masculine values. I'm not talking about your sex practices behind a bedroom door, that's your business. But I'm talking about when you try to destroy the male component, masculine component of the country, you've got a big problem because you don't have order. You see, you can't make somebody be orderly. I found that out on the criminal bench for 10 years. You can get somebody to want to be orderly and feel good and happy because they did it, because you put it in here as something that is a value. Now, for 10 years, I was on this criminal bench, got elected to 2 8-year terms, retired when I started doing the show full time. But one thing I discovered is that instead of just trying to run a turnstile and seeing how many people I could run through, I decided to set up a panel with a whole lot of doctors, psychologists, and psychiatrists. We ran a lot of tests, and there were some interesting results out of that, and I started getting feedback that was positive on something I found, and they even agreed it was something of a secret, but not really a secret. The statewide recidivism rate for felons was approximately 80%. It still is. In my courtroom, it was 18%. Why? Because I realized from my exposure going around here over the last 40 years practicing law, and one time running the city public defender's office and seeing what went out with that back in the 70s, is that these boys don't have man training. So what I did is coerce them to sit there with me while I rammed it down their throat. I'd give them no slack at all. And I just got stopped on the way over here by 2 people, separate people, just from the parking lot. Came up and both of them, strangely enough, said, "Judge, you remember me?" I said, "No." "Well, you gave me some time." I said, "Did I give you enough?" "Yeah, but it wasn't that thing. You showed me how to be a man. And now I'm a grandfather, and you know, I have been in no trouble, and you know, like you used to tell us. We don't need the police. What we need is simply to be able to look at ourselves in the mirror every morning when you brush your teeth, comb your hair, or whatever it is, shave and say, am I a man? Have I been acting like one? So you control yourself, and that has gone out of style. I look at what you have on TV and it disgusts me. And the other thing, I'll say this. Racism is alive and well in America, but in an unobvious place. I will have to say that in my 70-some years of existence, the most racist, biased, and bigoted place I've ever had to work at Hollywood, California. And they have, I should read you some of the letters that I got complaining because they didn't want to work around a straight black male.
What?
I mean, we used to march over to Human Resources. Oh, Judge, you got another complaint. What is it? They don't want to work around a heterosexual black man. Oh, they don't. Would I do anything? Yeah, they complain you open doors for women and you're courteous, and they think your courtesy is a slur on their femininity. Oh. They are particularly offended when somebody came in and you stood up because 3 women came to the table at the luncheon. Why do you have to keep talking about your slogan of protecting womanhood and promoting manhood? Women don't need to be protected, and men need to be suppressed, not promoted. And they feed poison to you, and if you go to their sites, they'll tell you what they've been doing for the last 50 years. They congratulate each other. This was a great move by director so-and-so and actor such and such to show that this old-time masculine virtue is obsolete. It was subtle, but it was beautiful. California, they send out pamphlets to elementary school students to take home that says, please do not tell your children to try to act like men or act like women or act like gentlemen or act like ladies. It constrains their options. Now, just keep that in mind and then start, the race thing is there. But last remark on that, there was a gentleman named Konrad Lorenz. He was a Jewish psychologist, and he fled Nazi Germany in the 30s. His specialty was animal aggression, but he got fascinated by the American experience. And I think he may have a clue as to why racism and bigotry are so prevalent in this country still. He said most European countries have a pretty homogeneous population, though there may be classes or caste in the society. But other than dress, you can't tell them much from each other, and that results in a massive amount of undisplaced interpersonal hostility and aggression. The European nations are historically always at each other's throats because the mechanism of the Germans, the no-good Huns, the doggone Frenzy frogs, or these elite Englishmen, all of that banter causes your side to look at it as my team versus the other guys, so they put up with a whole lot of tension inside and they displace a lot of aggression. He said at the time America, I think, had 130 million people. He said 30 million of them are Negroes and they're readily identifiable from more than a block away. He said if the 100 million generally homogenous people, though they may be Irish Catholics, Hispanic Catholics, they may be Christian, Protestant, whatever it may be, they may be English or French, they look alike from a distance. He said, but you can tell Negroes from a distance, so by venting their interpersonal hostility and aggression on the 30 million Negroes, even if vicariously, the country actually has more effective and usable cohesion. So I did a paper 49 years ago. It was interesting, caused a lot of talk around UCLA's campus. It was my theory that because at that point in time, for the young white intellectual elite, it was no longer favorable to be racist. They had no one to vent on, so they turned against their own institutions. All the violent anti-war demonstrations, what happened at the '68 Democratic Convention in Chicago, Kent State, the whole 9 yards worth of nobody knows what's going on, and it looks like the country's going to the devil. What happened? The civil rights movement was to a great extent effective in altering the attitudes of a certain significant portion of young whites, but they lost the scapegoat. So they turned on themselves. What you see down in the hood is also no scapegoat, so they turn on themselves. And by the way, this unmanned thing produces violence not only in the hallway, but in the hood. In the white population, it tends to build up and somebody goes crazy, like this cruise fool down there in South Florida. But you get the same thing in the black neighborhoods. You don't recognize it. It's just piecemeal. Here and there, no man training, emotional response to anything and everything, no dedication to being a productive member of society and leading the society with an ever-broadening circle of responsibility. You don't see that because they don't get man training. I can think back over 40-some years of going and visiting clients who were too damn lazy to come down and see me in my office. I had to go there and I watched the hell that was going on where they lived. No man training. That would not just be in the black community, that would be in the poor white communities too, and all of them are suffering problems, whether you're talking about the trailer park or the hood. And it is getting very bad. Why do you have this problem with illegals? It's because they still have a damn work ethic. It's strange. In California, where I had a ranch out there, I'd have people doing work. And you'd have to, I'm political, so I'd always want to see somebody's green card or whatever. Sometimes I'd turn my head, but the interesting thing is the people that just got over here, they'd get there half hour early, take no 15-minute break, take 10 minutes for lunch instead of an hour, no afternoon break, stay 2 hours later to hurry up and get to another job and politely ask if you could have some, donate a few lemons or limes out of your citrus groves for their cervezas that they ask permission to bring. Now you get their nephews or their uncles who've been over here and born here or citizens here, they're just as lazy as anybody else at the devil. What happened to you? You were an hour and a half late. What happened to you? Why did you take so long for lunch? Why are you trying to pilfer the gasoline supplies for the machine tools? See, it's poison because we feel entitled instead of having to earn, deserve, or have experience. New and improved, mostly just new, not improved. Everybody wants something. We've had 50 years of propaganda that if you want it, it's yours. Fantasyland and the Disney World thing. When you wish upon a star, it makes no difference who you are, your dreams come true. We forgot about the hard work aspect. I had a problem when I had a business. I had a bunch of high-paid employees while I was doing this show. I couldn't find anybody to hire, no matter what kind of degrees they had. I said, you know this, but where in the devil is your common sense? What happened to you? I had arguments with the UCLA Faculty Alumni Association. They wanted me to raise money. I said no. Why? Because you're telling these kids that they have their hearts set on having such and such degree, so we don't have to have any side breath requirements because it may cut down their GPAs and their hearts will be broken when somebody else gets accepted. And they come out and they've got postgraduate degrees and don't know a damn thing. You got a PhD, you got an master's degree. I got to come behind you and do your work because you don't know what you're looking at. This isn't something to look up. This is common sense. But see, we have a big problem because we countenance, because we want everybody to be kind and gentler instead of taking care of business. But anyway, I just vented on that. I ran into these people out there who said thank you for the man.
We've got a few minutes left for any questions. Oh, if you haven't signed the clipboard too, come over and sign the clipboard on your way out as well. Yes, ma'am. For Judge Brown.
Judge Brown, you commented just now at the end of your presentation about the proliferation of these degrees, postgraduate degrees that are being handed out to students all over the country. And they really are not deserving of those titles. What kind of impact do you think that is having on the development that is or is not taking place in our?
May I give you my humble opinion?
Sure.
This country got where it is the black population, the Asian population, Native American population, the Hispanic population, the white population, because at the end of the 19th century, we had something called public education that was supposed to give all citizens of whatever stripe of grounding on what the system was supposed to be about, some grounding on appropriate history to discover how it got that way, work ethic, and to get those basic things you needed to fill in as a viable worker in a newly industrializing society. We have cut that out for a number of reasons, which is the worst fallout for the race problems we've had for the last 50 years. And we have basically gutted our public schools. They can impose no discipline. It is ridiculous to get kids there when it's still dark at 7 a.m., 7:30 a.m. You tie up the highways and the streets. The parents are rushed trying to get to work, and then you let them out at 2 o'clock, 2:30. So who gets off work at 2:30? Nobody. So there's all this accommodation that you got to go pick the kids up. We don't look at it being safe for them to walk 3 blocks. You know, so they got to get picked up, and they are otherwise left alone with nobody to mind them. They did not get properly disciplined, bringing them, getting brought up. So you can't really trust them to be at home. And what's the solution? You'll give them a doggone video game. You will see a problem. If you want to see a big problem, watch these Liberty Mutual insurance commercials. Worst trash you ever want to see. Look at this. This boy, one of them I really hate. He can't change his time. He got a driver's license, and there are 2 of these boys, and neither one of them knows how to train a driver's license. And this fool mother's going, and I called Liberty Mutual, and they changed my son's tire for you. I saw it the first time, I almost vomited.
So to either of you, what kind of suggestions do you have for how we can break into?
Take control of your public schools and give them some authority to do what they need to do to get these children where they need to be. You need to go down and get on the county commissioners, city councilmen, all your elected officials and say, look, why are you sidetracking so many resources that ought to go to these kids because your friends are no longer getting the money under the table? They're getting it over because you privatized everything and you pay the money on the top of the table. That's right. This place is so crooked you would not believe it, but it's right out in the open. They don't even have to cheat. Board of Education's got a, since we're talking about that, has a legal department. They pay Birch, Porter, and Johnson $350 to $1,250 an hour to do all of their legal work for them. Why the devil do they have a legal department and they're hiring a prestigious law firm to do routine work that a rookie a year out of law school ought to be able to do? And we pay for it. They went through a thing to save money because they've got Teach America privatized that. You know now the requirement is teachers don't need a college degree. They can get an associate degree 2 years. The board doesn't even choose them. They got a private business run by a 29-year-old with no educational background, and they get to select the teachers, train them, choose who's to be hired, and where they get assigned. And that's our school system. Here. So is it any wonder it's dropping all off to the edge of the flat world?